We're the Marino family, and we have been writing the tales of Mrs. Wobbles and the Tangerine House.
Yo, what up?
Goodbye.
Listen, we are so happy that you're exploring our stories tonight.
We wrote our stories to help people learn more about foster care and adoption, which is pretty important to our family.
The stories are also meant to encourage reading. Kids can earn points by reading more of the text.
My favorite part about working on the Mrs. Wobble stories is working with my kids.
I like working on the Mrs. Wobble stories because they're a fun way for me to learn how to tell stories, to learn how to make stories, and good collaboration with my dad and sister.
I like working on Mrs. Wobble's stories as a family because it's a great way to bond, but it's a way to also dive into the things that we want to, the messages we want to tell, the stories that we want to tell.
I think what makes them unique is I think this all started when I was adopted. I think we first came out to it as a foster care home, and I think that I kind of influenced that because when I was adopted to this family, I was, I think, 2.5, 4, I don't know. But I think that now we're writing stories to teach people a little bit about foster care homes and other stuff like that, but also to give them a really fun story.
I would love if the Mrs. Wobble stories were able to get to a couple of children who need them, to reach out to maybe somebody who doesn't know anything about adoption, or somebody who needs this information and needs to be able to experience these lessons.
I like that it's turned us into storytellers, and more importantly, it's turned us into interactive storytellers, so we always think of story as something that could take lots of different paths. And
I think my favorite part of working on the stories, since I'm often in the consultant position, is getting to hear the stories. So a lot of times I'm in the idea phase of the story writing, and when I actually get to see it put together, it's beautiful and fulfilling. And I love when my dad's able to read me little sections that he's been working really hard on that have fulfilled my wildest imagination.
Unique about them because some books don't have the two put together. Some books just have, here's what foster care homes are, like stuff like that, but here's what's that. And also, it's a choose your own adventure. So that makes it really fun because you don't know which path you're going to take. You don't know what happens. You don't know where you're going to go, where you're going to end up. And it could just be you choose the wrong path, you choose the right path, but eventually it's a really good story.
Is we try to, make our analogy, make our story, but the information is still there. We're still hitting those hard topics because it's important that kids are thinking about these things and, they're able to develop a sense for it on their own and their own opinions because they are people too. We know that kids will be able to pick up on it.
stories don't have an infinite set of choices. And it's interesting because some of that ties to research that I saw Lucas Romano Prieto present at an ELO conference, where he noticed that certain readers like to have tons and tons of choices, like you might find in a choice of game story, for example. But on the other side of it, you had these other readers who got anxious the more choices there were. So Mrs. Wobbles were always kind of going for that balance.
So choices are interesting, and I think that we want to make it interactive and fun with the choices, but we also want to teach a lesson with them. So maybe, the broader idea is that your actions have consequences, but in that distinct moment, maybe if you hadn't helped your friend, you would have had a very different outcome. And we want to just really hit hard on those good morals and help kids interact with a world that's imaginary so that they can make those mistakes, have those experiences in a world that's on the internet rather than in real life, so that they can establish themselves in a sort of consequence-free world.
More about significant choices that actually constrain possibility sometimes, because, let's face it, that's what choice is like in life.
I think Mrs. Wobbles is unique in that we have a lot of text, and I think that's important, even though you might want to pass it by, because reading is really important, especially at a young age, and you want to be able to develop that vocabulary, but you also want to develop the habit of making reading fun, where you can make choices and it could be an interactive experience, while at the same time you're like reading a real story and you're getting to have that educational portion of it.
I grew up with choose your own adventure stories. I grew up reading them, and I think that, of course, set the stage for a lot of where we are right now. But I also grew up with my mom, my kid's Nana, reading to me stories to help me go to sleep. And so I think a lot of the Mrs. Wobble stories is trying to create some version of that for both with and for my kids, but also for other kids, so that they have that comfortable sense that is, even though it's interactive, it's still deeply tied to the written word, even the printed word.
I also hope that they not only become electronic stories, but they also become hard copy books, real books, and I would like that to have, if they become that, to have when I want it in my library, a complete collection of Mrs. Wobbles, and to look at it and say, wow, I wrote those. It's really fun for me to look at those.
Well, now wait, we also tried to make them fun.
Like the meat pie fighting game and the mysterious four.
Or the pirate swap meet in Pair the Pirate.
Listen, thanks for reading our stories. Let us know what you think.
There are more in store.